Hello, my friends in the Dinks world. It is Wednesday. You know what that means? It's Hump Day. Hump Day. That means it's time for Happy Hour. Humpday Happy Hour, that is, with Dennis in the Know. We're your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. We are live, and we are over tonight. A lovely glass of Pinot Grigio on my end. We'll see what my compadres are drinking in just a minute. But this is a time where we hang out, talk about dentistry, have a few laughs, and just get to know all of our great members in the group. So I'm with my great friends, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. As you all know, we are all practicing dentists. We are all business owners. And we are all educators, and our job is to bring all of you in the know. We got a really interesting show tonight. So after talking about it, we decided to do something a little bit different. We'll have a little bit of a roundtable, and Chad will tell you all about it. But that'll be after the news. All right, JB, do you have some news for us?
I have a few things. Yeah, you want to chat about it?
Well, let's chat about that. And then we have a really cool segment for everyone out there. It's going to be us talking away, but on real topics, not about our lives, not about our bowels, not about our families. We're going to be talking about some real dentistry. So, JB, why don't you do the news, and then Chad can introduce our segment.
You got it. It would be my honor, Jeff. Oh, it's nice to finally be back by myself. Last week with Jeff just really kind of cramped my, personal vibe and space. So it's really good to be on my own again. Let's talk about a few things. I posted a story this week. This was really like a very weird freak accident story of the 2-year-old who fell and lodged his toothbrush into the back of his pharynx. Fast forward, he even saw his dentist. The dentist looked at the injury. It seemed unremarkable. The parents removed the toothbrush from his pharynx, also seemed unremarkable. They didn't seek attention that evening. But fast forward 48 hours later, he was in stroke-like conditions. He presented with limited movement in his limbs. He had cognitive impairment, etc. So a battery of tests forward, it's all now linked back to that particular injury that happened to the pharynx. Super fascinating. I would put that in the very unique category of things you may ever run into in your own practice, but definitely one to file away in the memory bank for, being dismissive of things that don't fit in a box. Another interesting story that came out this week actually came out in the Journal of American Dental Association. A revision of the guidelines for protection for radiography. And I think this one is a really interesting study, and I definitely am going to post it. The AAOMR, which is the American Academy of Oral Maxillofacial Radiology, who we happen to have a member of on last week. They identified that no one, or they've revised the modifications for what is required for protection during radiography. And I got to be honest with you, they've dialed it back significantly, basically removing lead line aprons, removing thyroid protection. This was after an ad hoc committee that got together through the AAOMR and looked at all the literature to sort of start to discern whether or not these recommendations were actually valid in the research. Come to find out, they actually couldn't see a statistically different amount of radiation exposure and risk for thyroid cancer and other radiology complications for those who are receiving dental radiography versus those who were not. And so with that, and with a compilation of the data review, they have now started to really dial back the requirement. And I think, for a long time, it's been, part of the recommendation to remove thyroid collar, particularly for pans, et cetera, was the increased risk of retakes, needing to take the image again because you got the thyroid collar ended up showing up in the pan or something like that, and he needed to retake it. And that was one of the justifications. But this particular literature that's coming out is a compilation of literature review basically saying that there is no statistical significance in those who protect versus those who don't. What does this mean for the private practitioner? I think it's like anything else, the antibiotic prophylaxis, et cetera. You're likely still going to have the lead line aprons in your office. You may choose when you want to use it or not. You may educate patients on what the current literature would suggest. But at the end of the day, as Tom Viola so eloquently said last week, is that going to be the sword that you die on if a patient's very adamant about a thyroid collar, et cetera? But it's definitely worth noting. It's worth being aware of because other colleagues may bring it up, and consumers, if they had access to this information, might also cite these updated revisions. And so we'll post that on the Facebook page so that you can reference it for your education and also maybe for the education of your team members as well. I do think that it's really important. They seem to actually be genuinely concerned about the radiation risk for patients, and I think it warrants continuing to educate them as well. The last thing that we're going to discuss tonight was the ADA, as always, is putting out their statistics each month. They are taking survey data from a broad swath of dentists across the US to kind of gauge a continual pulse on the local level of what's happening in dental offices. Generally speaking, and I think this has been pretty consistent for about the last 6 to 8 months, the overall confidence level of the dentist, both for the dental office to recover post-COVID, but also for the general economy to recover post-COVID, there's still like almost a 50-50 split. You know, most dentists, or there's almost 50% of the dentists in all demographics, despite age, despite number of years in practice, despite owners versus non-owners. It seems like there's kind of this dividing line where 50%-ish, give or take a statistical numerator, thinks the economy will recover, and the other 50% thinks the economy is in trouble and that their practices may not be able to come out of the COVID fog. And I think that continues to sort of feed into a lot of the things you see that folks are posting on Facebook and other groups, looking for resources, help, support, a lot of really good questions about how they can improve their overhead staffing costs. How do they communicate better with patients to close treatment plans? You're seeing all of those different types of questions popping up because people are genuinely concerned about keeping their practices running. The other really interesting statistic that was very consistent across all demographics, both rural and suburban practices, was the number of cancellations that they were experiencing in the practice. The majority of those or openings in the practice, if you flipped it about a year or two ago, it was because of staffing shortages and they just didn't have the staff to be able to take the patients in. Today, it is just genuine no call, no show, or very late last minute cancellations for patients. And frankly, I'm feeling the same thing. We had one schedule at the beginning of the day today, and it was a totally different schedule at the end. And so much of it was last minute cancellations for a variety of reasons. So, I think my practice is fairly representative of what we're seeing across the board in the US in those HBS statistics. So we'll continue to watch to see if things are changing and if there's a pulse that we need to let you know about. But that's why you tune in every week, right? It's not just Jeff's pretty face and Chad's witty banter. It's this hard-hitting journalism that we bring to you. And with that, that's the news.
Beautifully done as always, JB.
Why, thank you.
Yes, excellent. And I am more than a pretty face. I just want you to know that.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh,
I agree.
Goodness. My gosh. I can't believe that. And I'm so nice to you too.
You are more than a pretty face.
Okay, thank you.
You have a great personality.
Hey, that'll carry you a long way. Anyway, we had a really great thought, and we'll be curious to get your feedback. We want all of you out there watching and listening to please chime in on some of these topics. We were tossing around some ideas, different ideas for the format of our show. and thought it might be good just to have some engaging conversation about some current trends without a guest, just the three of us. And, all three of our practices are different in many ways. And we all come from some different perspectives, different takes on insurance, different takes on even some technologies. And so we thought, let's just have a big round table and let's see where it goes. So Chad, do you want to introduce our segment?
I think you pretty much did, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. No, actually, Jeff, what you said is perfect. I think, over the past 3 years, we've been bringing a live guest almost every week. I think looking back, we've missed 3 or 4. And, although that is fun and we will continue to do so on a regular basis, every now and then we're going to do something a little bit different. And so we decided to pick a pertinent topic in dentistry. And a lot of this comes from what we see on social media, whether it be from Facebook, from Instagram, from whatever. And we thought, here's 3 dentists that are fighting this battle that all of us are. And, there's a lot of changes in our profession, some for the good and some not so good. But one of the things that's going on, well, I shouldn't say one of the things. There's a lot of things that are going on in our profession that are perceived threats. So we decided tonight that we wanted to kind of roundtable what is the biggest perceived threat to dentistry as we know it. And, when we look at this on social media, I think the number one answer we would all agree is probably DSOs. And I think that's the number one answer. But believe it or not, we actually had a little discussion and it was unbated between the 3 of us. And that is not even one of the topics that we were going to discuss. I mean, we could certainly discuss it towards the end, but that's not something that the 3 of us really perceived as a threat to dentistry as we know it. So let's go ahead and open the conversation with, what do we perceive as the biggest threat to dentistry as we know it? And I'll throw it to you, JB, first.
Personally, I think, first off, I think this is a fantastic format. Hopefully it resonates with our viewers because we do fancy ourselves as the after CE course hangout. And we've all been in those environments before where we learn so much from one another, just talking about what it is to be a dentist every day, either validating the challenges and concerns that we have or help, offering solutions that we've encountered that we're like, hey, have you thought about this? Or I've been using this and it worked really well. Those have been invaluable moments for me in my own personal journey. So I hope tonight's show will be that same type of journey for folks who are tuning in to say, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm currently struggling with. And what are some of the ways that you've combated that? So for me, I think one of the biggest challenges for dentistry, and I don't think you're wrong about DSO. I think DSO is very much changing the global landscape of dentistry and what the consumer sees as a commodity for the product we provide. And so I think that's kind of like this big overarching compression on the industry. But on a local scale, like in my own practice, one of the biggest threats that we continue to struggle with is the overhead. And I've talked to a lot of dentists that are about in my practice age range, who feel like, well, it's kind of my own journey, honestly. And then it gets validated by other individuals. I'm out about 15 years. Most of the debt service that I had has been managed and paid. We were really aggressive. We're kind of Dave Ramsey dentists where we don't like to have a lot of debt. So we're pretty aggressive in our pay structure to get rid of it. And honestly, what we thought we would see and what I think a lot of dentists saw prior to us, maybe if they've been out 25 or 30, and Jeff can validate this, as you were getting some of that debt service managed, that wasn't an old joke. It's a life and practice joke.
I didn't take it that way.
I did.
I wanted to reference a successful business person, and Jeff was the one I chose.
Right. That's good.
So yeah, you pick what you think. Anyway, so I felt like our profitability just was never getting any better. Like, because as we were like reducing this overhead or reducing our mortgage management, our overhead was going precipitously up as well. So supplies were costing more, staff was costing more, softwares, this, that, and the other we were having to onboard, all these vendors to actually help this beast kind of run on a daily basis. And I looked at my business partner one day. I was like, we should be looking at our banking account and going, wow, we did a job well done for this month. I said, where is the money going? Like, where is it disappearing to? Because it's not going to us. So I'm just curious, like, who's winning in this game? And so I just referenced that to say, I think that those docs that are out there, maybe, I don't know, we'll say 12 to 20 years, who took out the loans, they bought the equipment, they invested in the practice, they were all in on the idea of what they were building, perhaps are sitting there now going, I was told it was going to be like this and that I would be able to be a lot more comfortable and I wouldn't be as concerned about whether or not we were going to be able to make the bills every month. And yet it doesn't feel like we've ever really kind of hit that particular stride. And, it's not disappointing, but it's sort of shocking that after being pretty aggressive of those things, like the economics on the other side of the expenses didn't hold steady. And so to me, I think that's actually why a lot of doctors are going to DSOs or group amalgamations, whether they sell their practice or they just join in like group buying practices, or they join these membership clubs, or they buy their supplies from China. Like, all of those things are a response to the fact that, to buy your supplies from your traditional supply warehousers who have built really great relationships with a lot of doctors has become very cost prohibitive.
So JB, I have a question. I'm sorry, Chad, but while she was talking, the first thing that came to mind was this, because I know you're someone who looks at the profit and loss monthly. What are the line items that you're really seeing the biggest increase in? Because I think everyone spends so much time on this merchandise thing, which is typically only going to be 3 or 4%, maybe 5% if you're not watching it. And even, in joining, a larger group or joining a buying club or whatever, at the end of the year, you might be able to knock 1% off that single line item, which I'm not saying that doesn't matter, because a percent here, a percent there, a percent here, all of a sudden now, you can have an extra, $50,000 in your pocket by doing that. But I guess I'm wondering, were there any real significant jumpers percentage wise, as a percentage of collections on your profit and loss?
So post COVID, it's been staff for sure. And you were having to then pay people to not leave, which we'd never been in that practice before. Like, we're a pretty open book, and we've always said, like, I never want to be held hostage to a staff member. And at some point, the pay scale is the pay scale. And, it either works for you, it doesn't. This is what we can afford to do. And we are a PPO practice with some fee for service mixed in. So there is just this kind of understood economics of how that all works. And that's all gone haywire, because I know any staff member tomorrow could leave for 10% more in pay at any level, admin, dental assistants, or hygiene. And so for sure, we had to move people up to ensure that we were at least comparable. And we're still not the highest paying, but we were at least somewhat comparable with what the market was starting to demand, just in order to retain the current staff. And honestly, Jeff, that's with no increase in skills. That's with no increase in functionality. Like, up until that point, we usually would do like a small cost of living raise if the employee had shown that they were committed to the company and had done a good job for the year and were performing well. But the bigger increases came with either increased job responsibilities, an assumption of role in the practice, or a skill set attribute. So you go from a DA1 to a DA2, or you go from a dental hygienist to a expanded function dental, whatever that happened to be, then you could see pay scales move in accordance to that. Now we're just paying to keep up with inflationary values that are pretty arbitrary. And so for me, number one was staff, and mostly because the increases were not directly affiliated with anything that was going to make my practice more profitable, other than they weren't going to quit or, and leave us with open schedules that we couldn't accommodate because we didn't have the staff. So that was probably number one. Number two is the number of softwares that we've had to bring on over the years to sort of accommodate all the different nuances that are happening in the marketplace that you need some automation for. And frankly, all the DSOs have it. And that's where they're making, a lot of efficiencies in their practice. So in order to be competitive in that or be profitable, you need, I feel like we're up to like 6 or 8 different subscriptions a month that we're having to pay to be able to be efficient and knowledgeable about our accounts receivable, our claim submission rates, our phone systems, our operating systems, our metrics, if you will, like all the different pieces. So that's been a line item that's definitely gone up for us in the last couple of years. In order to be more agile, I think. The problem, I think, with all of those different softwares, there's so much overlap. Like each one of them do maybe 80% the same and 20% nuanced and unique. And the nuanced and unique is what you want out of it, but you're paying for the whole package. So now you're $4,000 in a month on all these stupid subscriptions for all these different softwares to supposedly make you more profitable, improve your online reviews, improve your efficiency, your texting confirmations, like all that stuff. And then I will say it is dental supply costs. And that's because in general, all dental supply, truly it's just all expenses related to tangible items went up 15%. So it's the Cokes, or yes, we do. We provide Cokes and waters and stuff like that in the break room. That's up 15%. It's the consumables in your dental operatory that's up 15 to 20%. It's your lab fees that are up 15%. It's your box of paper that you need to print health histories on or whatever. Everything is up 15%. So expenses as a whole are collectively up from 2021. And that's, what's not up on my line item is the doctor compensation line. Like that seems to be home real steady. I seem to be very dedicated to it. So
totally agree with that. But now, would you also say being a big fee for, being, having a large PPO population in your practice and being highly insurance driven, that reimbursements have not kept up with inflation either. So that not only is it an increase in expenses, but really you've got, when you're looking at that as a percentage of collections, when collections are lower, those percentage numbers are naturally going to be higher. And that's really kind of an easy way, a tricky way to lose profitability and not really be able to put your finger on it, right?
Exactly.
Is when, okay, it didn't, reimbursement didn't keep up with inflation. Yeah, we're still collecting, 98% of what's owed to us, but what's owed to us didn't keep up with the inflation that was occurring on all of the other line items that were the minuses on your profit and loss.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct. And so I know a lot of folks have poo-pooed, different things that PPO doctors are having to do. I never poo-poo the things that doctors are doing to stay in business. So if a doctor needs to charge, especially a PPO doctor, if they need to pass on a merchant services fee, if they need to pass on like some of those things that, we've all just sort of assumed and taken on for all these years, like at some point, if your expenses are up 15%, your reimbursement rates haven't changed, and you're paying for every transactional fee, you're giving these free goods away in your operatory, they come in. And yes, there's a hard cost associated with every bag that walks out is $2 to $2.50, depending on what you're giving away. Well, all of these things start adding up, and you're like, okay, well, the expenses keep going up like this. And then in order for me to collect on that, I'm paying 3% transactional fee to actually get my money. I'm taking a 20% pay cut on the service that I've already agreed to. Like the margin between profitability gets so narrow that you certainly cannot judge doctors for having to make pretty difficult business decisions about keeping their doors open. We may not agree with it or like it, but at the end of the day, as a business owner, that is their autonomy to make the decisions in order to stay open and to keep people employed and provide a service in their community. So, and for PPO doctors, and heaven forbid if they're in capitation plans or DHMOs, the margin is so thin at this point in order for you to stay afloat. And let's be honest, the doctor's carrying all the liability. So meanwhile, they're the ones that have the potential every day to get sued for any procedure or activity that didn't go the particular patient's way and they perceive it to be a poor outcome. So as the margin gets narrower and the doctors are carrying this ongoing burden of risk liability, I think that's why you're now seeing this sort of blow up of burnout and frustration in the industry. And honestly, doctors sort of in my age range, and it did show up in the HPI with ADA, there definitely is that segment between 40 and 55 where there's a pretty high, there's a confidence issue in the industry and a leaving private practice in the industry.
I would say that there's also a catch-22 because, you know, as we kind of try to monitor overhead, we're always kind of responsible for keeping up with the Joneses, so to say.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to make sure, you know, it's kind of like if you're out with somebody and they say, you know, oh, everybody in my family wears hand-me-down clothes. You're kind of like, no shit. Yeah, everybody can tell. You can't have a hand-me-down practice. You can't buy cheap shit in your practice. I'm sorry. You've got to stay up with it. And, you know, I'm glad to hear you say, I shouldn't say I'm glad to hear you say, but I was waiting for you to say that these subscriptions are going to be the death of us.
Yeah.
And, you know, they really are. But in order to maintain, you know, a current and a modern and, you know, practice, you've got to keep up with these subscriptions, you know, not only for, you know, the sanctity of your business, but for the experience of your patients as well. It's really important that we do. So, you know, we've got to keep putting money into it. And the only thing that we have that can make up for that is an increase in fees.
Don't you feel like the challenge though is with all of these softwares and technology is I feel like I probably only use 20% of any of it because I don't have the bandwidth, nor does my office manager or anybody else in the practice to actually be an expert at a review software or my practice management software or my scanner software or my, you know, like, so in actuality, while we have to have them and you know, and I use an ad nauseum number of them, I also recognize that as a small business, we have all these sophisticated systems in place, yet we don't have the people, nor can we afford the people to actually make them really fruitful. Like if this were a corporation and you had 30 different softwares, you would have a whole IT department running them.
You would have a technology implementation specialist that was responsible for making sure that every piece of technology was being used to generate the largest return on investment for that piece of technology. But we are that person, you know, that, and that's the thing. We're the burger flippers and we're the cash register takers and we're the accountant for the firm. And of course I'm exaggerating. We all have accountants and we all have receptionists, but literally a piece of us has to be dedicated to looking at that if we don't want to get ripped off in the end, right? So there's still that obligation in what we do to have to be all those people. So I totally agree with you. I mean, you do have to make the investment in technology, and even if you only use most of our technologies, 20% of their capability, you're probably still doing really well
Yeah,
with that
I
piece
agree.
of technology,
Right.
and you are still showing the public that you care about the quality of care,
Yeah.
and that you're staying up with with current trends, and you're a high tech office, which I think is absolutely immeasurable. There's really only a small percentage of the population that wants to go to a what I would call a no frills. A lot of them go there because they take their insurance, or
Right.
because they can afford it. But given the choice, that would not necessarily, in my eyes, be the first choice for most patients.
And what we're finding is that as we embrace technology, you have to stay on top of it. Not only the technology that you're adding to your practice, but you could incorporate a piece of technology or let's just say this: you incorporate two pieces of technology or two technological advancements in your practice at the same time from two separate companies. You have to stay on top of it, because 3 or 4 months later, there's going to be one company that offers those two pieces of technology for the same or a lesser price.
Exactly.
And so you've got to make sure that you're always getting the best. And so, just an aside here, when we switched to cloud-based, and a cloud-based, I'm going to call it a conglomerate that lumped together all of this technology, it allowed me to release some of those other subscriptions for a lesser price. And that's what we constantly need to maintain. There was a question that came through, and I want to answer it real quick. Somebody asked that everybody dreams of a fee-for-service practice, but if you're a PPO practice, how do you raise fees? And so as a fee-for-service practice, this is going to be my answer. My answer is that every year you've got to raise fees, regardless of what type of practice you're in. Because even though you're going to get a discounted rate for the insurance, if we don't show that we're raising fees on an annual basis, then the insurance company is never going to raise their fees.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
I know that it's like you're thinking that I'm full of crap, but I promise you that the bubble is going to have to pop at some point in time. They're going to hopefully increase their premiums, but if we never increase their payout, I should say, but if we never increase fees, that's never going to happen. The sad part of all of this is that if you're a PPO practice, and I'm not knocking any PPO practice, I feel that I walked into a fee-for-service practice 23 years ago, and we've been fortunate enough to maintain that status, and I feel blessed to do that. But I'm not knocking any PPO practice. But the sad part is that, and the reality is that if you're a PPO practice and you increase your fees, there's going to become a point where those patients that are cash pay and that you're not assigned to their insurance, they're paying quite a bit more than your PPO patients. And but I think that regardless, you have to increase your fees on an annual basis. Do either of you all disagree with that?
Not at all. That is one of the most important lessons that I learned early on. And my first practice that I've now sold to Dr. Lawson was a 100% fee-for-service practice, and I understand that I came through at a very different time than a lot of people are coming out now. The landscape was very different. I was able to develop that. I was able to build a reputation in an environment that always had a large number of new patients coming in, and where they knew what they were going to get when they came to my practice. I think that that's a little bit tougher now, but that was one of the first lessons that I learned, is that if you are going to keep up with technology the way that you need to, and if you are going to maintain your education the way you need to, and if you are going to learn new ways and better ways to make people more comfortable, do procedures more efficiently, and provide the best care, that there has to be a fee for that. And And if you don't translate that, it's exactly what you said. Even if you decide to begin taking insurances in, those numbers have to reflect the quality and the dentistry that's being done there. Otherwise, you never raise usual and customary for the rest of the crowd. And I know this is not like we can't collude in dentistry, but we do need to be charging a reasonable fee, because anyone who is charging lower fees lowers the usual and customary, which lowers reimbursements for anybody who's accepting insurance. So, it's just something that all dentists need to do.
I would just chime in as the hybrid practice. A couple of things. One, we do a fee increase, but we are mindful, like Chad said, that that's really just a fee increase to our fee for service patients. And so we try to keep that within a reasonable margin, not to just pass cost on to those who've elected not to have insurance. The second thing is to work with a company. There are a couple really good ones out there, and if you want specific names, I can recommend them. To do fee negotiations and a review of all of your different contracts at least every 3 years, I think, is a pretty reasonable pace. Maybe every 5. The interesting thing about working with these companies is that they understand the nuances of all the interrelationships, which you will never pick up on. So, for instance, when I opened my practice in 2010, we were in network with these 2 different groups, and we're not going to mention names because of all the rules and all those things, but 2 different groups. What we didn't know was these 2 groups actually fell under a similar umbrella, and we had 2 different fee schedules with these individual insurance companies. So when we brought this company in and they said, oh, well, if you drop this one company, you will automatically get rolled into the other company at their higher fee schedule. And those patients will still be seen as in networks. You don't need these 2 contracts. You can go to the singular contract. Fees go up for every patient that was in the old insurance company, but also in this other insurance company. And so that's an immediate 10 to 15% raise on that group of patients, whether it's 3%, 10% of your population. I would have never known that as a lay person who doesn't manage these relationships with insurance companies. And so bringing those experts in who know these third-party networks and how they're all inter-nuanced together can definitely give you an opportunity for a very effective negotiation strategy. I actually am really lucky that I have about 4 companies that I'm in network with that I can direct negotiate with. And I will send off an email once every 2 years. I have it on my calendar to say, hey, I'd like to discuss a fee review. And I've built that relationship over time. Now I have direct contacts that I can go to, and we can look at fee increases. There are companies that will not entertain that. They just simply won't do it. And then you have to decide if that's worth staying in network. The last piece of that puzzle, I would say, is that I thought when I opened that we could be this unique hybrid between fee for service and PPO. And I think in that environment, we really were successful. We really had some really great years. Post-COVID has changed a lot of my views on whether or not these hybrid practices of the touch and feel of the fee for service, but the cost reimbursement of a PPO, I think may become more and more of a unicorn. And I say that because now, like, judge me if you want, I'm really an open book. We don't give away toothbrushes anymore, because for me, that was $650 a month on our P&L that had frankly very little ROI. But instead, I have all the latest technology in the practice. I take 20 minutes to talk to patients about their treatment and recare. Like, that's the exchange rate that I'm operating in currently. Like, I don't have the overhead expense to say, I'm just going to give you things to make you feel better about the practice so that you can go home and take that on your next trip. But what I can guarantee you is that you'll come and have a conversation with us, and you'll see technology that you don't see in every practice. That is in our PPO fee for service practice. That's the exchange rate we're currently operating in and how we've managed our overhead. So it is a different dance, and it looks different than your average fee for service practice. but it continues to allow us to be profitable and run it like a healthcare business.
And JB, I think you've sold yourself short, because although I've never been a patient in your practice, I've been
You
in your
did pee on
practice.
it.
That was a joke. I couldn't go.
I know, of course.
Stage
Once
fright.
in a lifetime.
Anyhow, even though I've never been a patient in your practice, you sell yourself short, because I know that you and Andrew are both incredible business people, and you have an incredibly successful practice or practices. So, you've found a decent formula. I know it's frustrating, as it is to all of us. We are getting close to being out of time, but I wanted to touch on something, because this was this went a totally different direction than I thought it would. But I wanted to bring up one thing before we end. Is it okay if I switch?
We didn't even get to our
maybe
concerns.
This is a 3-part series.
I know. And the thing is that one of my things tonight that I was going to bring up was staffing. And honestly, I think we could have a whole conversation on staffing down the road, and maybe we'll do that again, because I absolutely love this format. But I wanted to bring up one of the things that's really just been weighing on my mind, and just see where you all are in the few minutes that we have left, because I feel that when COVID hit, we had all these quote unquote regulations that were going to come out. And, we thought they were going to be the death of us. Like, we're going to have, dentistry was going to look totally different than it did before COVID. Thank God it doesn't right now. Is it going to happen? I don't know. All that is kind of silenced a little bit. But what has happened is these other regulations and these other rules have come out that, to me, I think that those are really detrimental to dentistry. Like, let's take, for instance, what the DEA has done to us. I mean, our state has a requirement of 4 hours a year, or 4 hours each license renewal, of pharmacology, pain management, basically the opioid crisis. Okay, we get it. Now the DEA comes out that at every renewal, we have to have 8 hours in addition to what our state requires.
It's a lifetime.
Lifetime? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, still. Lifetime. 8 hours. That's 8 hours of somebody's year for CE that in our world, we're getting 4 hours every 2 years.
Especially when the data doesn't support, like, they blame the opioid crisis on dentists. So we'll start with that. But then what the data actually shows is, we'll use this fancy word again for Bobby, the precipitous decrease in dentists writing opioid descriptions or prescriptions. So you can actually categorize it into like less than 10% of licensed dentists in the marketplace today are writing over and above what would be a normal prescription rate for opioids. So they know who they are. They know exactly who they are.
You want to get me on a soapbox?
Yeah. Even in our heyday. So I graduated in 1991. There, I said it. You all know how freaking old I am.
You say 1901?
1991. Thank you very little. When I graduated,
I'm going to say this.
We were writing 12 at a time. We were writing 12, 15 pills at a time. You do not create addicts at 12 to 15 pills. Maybe there were a few wayward oral surgeons, or I don't want to throw oral surgeons under the bus, or dentists that were doing surgery that were just throwing large number of pills out there. But I had freaking ankle surgery in 2005, and they gave me 100 Percocet. Like, literally, I had a bottle with 100 Percocet. I took the one that they told me to take before the local wore off, and I never needed another one.
And you had 100.
And
how
I
much
had
you get for the other 99?
Yeah.
But
why do you think I sold my practice?
I may regret bringing this up, but I'm going to anyways. We're required to take the opioid crisis basically course in Texas. All right. I find it awfully interesting that As of the most recent time that I took it, which was about 6 months ago, all the statistics on opioids stopped for in 2019. That was the latest statistic that they had. Opioids were going up like this, and fentanyl was going up like this. And in 2019, it stopped because fentanyl was getting pretty close to opioids. Opioids have probably flattened out or decreased, but what we're finding is fentanyl is through the roof. I found it awfully interesting that now that we have this huge fentanyl crisis in America, that all of the statistics are related and we're talking about opioid, but I think we need to be able to recognize that there's a fentanyl issue as well. And
Oh,
so
that's a whole other issue, Chad.
I think there's a lot to it, and I don't
I agree.
disagree that we need pharmacology management courses, but that's just a little piece of the regulations that they're throwing at us. I mean, we have so many requirements, regulations, licenses, permits, and then in a few months we're going to get thrown these additional codes that we have to keep adding, these little, whatever the hell they're called, little additional thingamajiggers at the end of our stupid codes to, is that going to make it to where insurance is going to say, oh, well, it was a CAD CAM crown made out of XYZ. We're not paying for this one, but we'll pay for a CAD CAM crown made out of ABC, and we'll pay for a lab fabricated crown. Is it going to give them additional layers of reimbursement? And that's what concerns the hell out of me.
Chad,
and I think that regulations are killing us.
Yeah, Chad, I'm gonna piggyback on you because we only have like a minute left here, and obviously we can't get into this topic, but I want to throw it out there as food for thought, maybe to stimulate some conversation, because one of my biggest concerns is about, well, two things really. One is the trend away from dentists wanting to be involved in organized dentistry. One, but more importantly is this talk about single payer systems and Medicare now getting involved in dentistry. And I really believe that would be the death of us because of what Medicare has done, even in medicine, to reimbursements. Because what many people don't know is that even if you're even if you're a non-participating provider in Medicare, if you accept any Medicare benefit or you participate in Medicare in any way, shape, or form, for most physicians, they cannot charge any patient more than 10% above the Medicare allowable. That is a rule that is written in, that if you accept any Medicare benefit, you cannot charge any other patient more than 10% above the Medicare reimbursement for that. And so I don't say that because we don't have time for this conversation. I say that because I think a lot of people are looking, oh, great, 47 or 48% of the elderly that are on Medicare don't have any dental insurance. So yeah, let Medicare start paying for dentistry. No, I'm saying we cannot get in that bed, and we have to be vigilant about staying involved in organized dentistry, learning the facts, and the devil's in the details. And just because Medicare pays you on a lot of patients, when all of a sudden your fee-for-service patients can't get charged what you were normally charging because now you've accepted some Medicare reimbursements, and now by Medicare law, you're not allowed to charge more than 10% above Medicare reimbursement for any patient if you're accepting Medicare monies. We just need to be careful. And this is my message to young dentists is, I know you don't see the ROI on organized dentistry, but it really is a huge thing. And you've got to know what's going on. Get involved at the state level. get involved at the national level if you want to, but we've got to have boots on the ground. We've got to have people that actually know what's going on. Sorry for that little soapbox, but
Well,
I had to go there.
I'm not going to close the show. I'm going to leave you two to that. But your point about that, Jeff, with organized dentistry. So you were referencing all the different modifiers, Chad, that were being proposed for like
Those
a
are the
crown
thingamajiggers.
procedure.
Modifiers.
That's right. But because organized dentistry, AGD, and other groups became very active in participating in that CDT enhancement project that was being launched by the ADA, a lot of that has been squashed, at least for the short term. And now they're just going back to traditional evaluation of the CDT code. So you're not going to see the modifiers and the diagnostic codes and other things that were being proposed. And a lot of that came from the activity level, both on the state and national, from all the different organizations that had a seat at the table to have that discussion, and the open public forums where dentists got online and said, these are my concerns about the direction that you're trying to take this program. That only happened because people decided to make that a priority in their daily lives, to be active in the process. So you can say your dues don't matter, and you can say that your voice won't be heard, but that's a very direct and very recent project that was getting a lot of legs to move forward with all these different modifiers and diagnostic codes that has since been tabled because of the input that they received from a lot of individuals and groups.
Well, I love this conversation, and I could have gone another 2 hours. We didn't know where this is going to go, but I can promise you that after this spirited debate, it will happen again.
Absolutely.
So I'm just thankful that the three of us agree on most everything, because if we didn't, it could be a very spirited in the other direction. It could
Except
have been
your haircut.
It could have been angrily precipitous if we did not agree. But anyhow, folks, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Look for this on a podcast if you missed some of it. We thank every one of you for everything that you give to this group, and hopefully you get out as much in return. And next week, we will have David Rice and Pam Maragliano Munoz that will be discussing their new podcast and their new endeavor with dental economics. We'll also be discussing the upcoming dental economics conference in October. So, folks, please come back next week and stay tuned. And let's keep this conversation going in the posts and comments in the coming week. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.